for shareholders. The questions surrounding this merger go beyond jobs, contracts, and consumers. They also go to editorial independence of two of America's most significant news organizations, CNN and CBS News. In recent weeks, administration officials have openly expressed their preferences about CNN's future ownership, from the White House to podiums in the Pentagon. Take Secretary Hegseth's comments regarding coverage of the war in Iran. The sooner David Ellison takes over, he said, the better. This administration couldn't be clearer about what they intend to do, which is to tell the news media not just what to say, but how to say it. Public reporting indicates that assurances have been made about the future editorial content and direction of those networks, something that should never be used as leverage to gain favorable treatment of a merger. These are not normal circumstances, and we would be failing in our oversight responsibilities if we did not examine these issues carefully. To help us discuss and examine our questions about this pending merger, as well as the need for a federal tax incentive, we are joined by four witnesses who bring extraordinary talent, expertise, and perspectives to this moment. Noah Wyle stars in, co-writes, directs, and is an executive producer of the medical drama The Pit, for which he made history as the first male actor to win all 5 major television acting awards in a single season. He previously led the genre-defining TV hit ER as Dr. John Carter across 15 seasons, a role for which he earned 3 Golden Globe Award nominations and 5 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. He has also starred in, produced, written, and directed many, many other critical acclaimed works. Matt Loeb has served as, didn't know I was going to say some nice things about you, did you? That's why we keep your mic muted until I'm done with that, so you won't cut me off. Matthew Loeb has served as international president of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees since July 31, 2008. IATSE represents workers across the United States and in Canada in motion picture and television production, live events, theater, trade shows, exhibitions, broadcasting, the shops that support these industries, and more. In the context of today's conversation, IATSE represents virtually all the behind-the-scenes workers in film and television production. A longtime IATSE president, President Loeb, has helped build an organization, a strategy in motion picture and television production that brought thousands of workers into union contracts with health and retirement benefits. Jim Acosta is an award-winning journalist and the host of The Jim Acosta Show on Substack and YouTube. You should go and subscribe right now. How am I doing, Jim?
Thank you.
He was the chief White House correspondent and an anchor for CNN and a correspondent for CBS News. He was also the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Enemy of the People, A Dangerous Time to Tell the Truth in America. Jax DeLuca is a cultural strategist and former film and media arts director at the National Endowment for the Arts. She has championed independent film for over 2 decades. Currently, she is the interim director for the Future Film Coalition, a newly formed national alliance dedicated to safeguarding and strengthening the independent film and media sector in the United States. Thank you all for being here and joining us and ensuring that California and Hollywood remain the global magnet for storytelling, innovation, and creative employment. I'm now going to turn over to Congresswoman Friedman to give a brief opening statement.
Thank you so much, Senator Schiff. Thank you for putting this hearing together, and I want to thank all of the witnesses for traveling to Burbank, the media capital of the world. And thank you to the city of Burbank for hosting us today in my home district. This district, which is the California's 30th congressional district, is home to almost every major film studio, as well as all of the ancillary businesses that support it. And I would tell you that besides the direct jobs that you see at Disney, at DreamWorks, and Warner Brothers, Paramount, all the studios that are around here, there are tens of thousands of jobs in prop shops, in special effects houses. There are dry cleaners, there are coffee shops, all that depend on that economic activity here in Hollywood. This industry supports almost 700,000 jobs and contributes $115 billion a year to our economy. It is one of America's greatest exports. It shapes, thank you. I was always behind the camera, but I definitely, in a room filled with people who know about the industry, I appreciate that. She is my AD. So I was saying that this is an important industry because of the tens of thousands of jobs, locally hundreds of thousands of jobs, over 2 million jobs nationwide. But it also is the way that the United States has told its story to the rest of the world. And when you ask people who immigrate to this country what drew them to America, what made them want to come here, very often they'll talk about their vision of this country, of freedom, of what this nation means to people and to immigrants through the way we have told our story in movies from Hollywood. If you look at products that are sold around the world, from Levi's blue jeans being a huge driving global force in the 60s and 70s, much of it traces back to the image of those products in American movies. So there's a lot of value in this industry beyond the jobs. But here in Los Angeles, while we are recovering from devastating fires, when we've had so many struggles, the prospect of losing thousands of jobs right now is just overwhelming to the people in Los Angeles. And we have seen this industry bleed jobs decade after decade. I moved here in 1992. I was living in New York working at HBO, and I got a job at Paramount Pictures. That's what brought me to this coast. It's what brought so many people here. Those jobs and that economic ecosystem that brought me into this community has been failing for years. And this merger is seen by so many people as a harbinger of things to come, of a shrinking of this industry that seems overwhelming to Los Angeles. LA County lost more than 42,000 motion picture jobs from 2022 to 2024, and production declined over 13% just in 1 year. And we have seen that year after year. That's not just those direct jobs. It's also all of those other companies that depend on that. So there's a lot at stake as production leaves. And now with Paramount, Skydance's $110 billion acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, that's going to combine 2 of the 5 remaining Hollywood major studios. Paramount's projecting $6 billion in synergies, and we know what that word means. It means cuts, it means layoffs, and LA workers are going to feel that first. This merger could define whether Los Angeles remains the entertainment capital of the world or becomes an afterthought. Senator Schiff and I have been addressing these concerns every single day, and I want to praise him for being such a leader on this issue. We demanded concrete commitments from Paramount, and Ellison's letter put some of those on the table, including in his letter, he talks about both studios combined producing 30 films a year, a 45-day theatrical window, and real support for the federal film tax incentive that Senator Schiff and I are working on in Congress. And we intend to measure them. We intend to hold them to those promises. And that's why the oversight that Senator Schiff is leading here today is so important. Because the workers, the thousands of workers on sound stages and back lots and all across Los Angeles need to see these promises hold up in their daily lives, not just in a letter. So we are all prepared to go on the offense. I'm fully committed to working on bipartisan legislation for the National Film Tax Credit to keep production and paychecks here at home. The future of the industry is truly in our hands, and what happens next with this merger is important. It's important that our federal regulators do their jobs, that they are impartial as they look at this merger, and that the president's personal feelings towards any one company or any one owner is not what is being considered, that it's the jobs here at home, it's the impact on consumers in terms of their choices when they stream, and it's on the economy. Those are the basis upon which this merger should be judged. With that, thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Representative Friedman. I now would like to invite our witnesses to make their opening statements. Mr. Wyle, if you would start us off. And you have to make sure the green light is on.
Green light is on. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schiff, for extending the invitation to speak with you today and to support you in your effort to enact.
I'm not sure that we're hearing you through the mic.
Oh, right there.
There you go.
Oh, that green button.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Thank you, Senator Schiff, for extending the invitation to speak with you today and to come and support you in your effort to enact a federal tax incentive for U.S.-based film and television production. As an Angelino with generational roots to this city and as a seasoned member of its creative community, advocacy for Los Angeles-based production is something that is very close to my heart. Over the last 6 years, the aggregate effect of projects leaving the state in search of tax credits, the pandemic, and last year's fires has been a near cratering of our once thriving industry. We lost 42,000 film and TV jobs in LA County between 2022 and 2024. And as of last year, high budget productions are down 43%. Admittedly, it's really hard to shoot a TV show in Los Angeles, and it's really expensive. Prohibitively so, unless you adopt an economic model that allows you to take full advantage of the California tax incentive to offset your gross costs. In our case, it was a speculation that we hoped would pay off. I was asked to participate in today's hearing to tell a success story. The pit has blessedly become proof of that speculative concept, and I'm happy to report we'll commence shooting season 3 this summer, and that a rising tide has indeed lifted all boats. In season 1, under the 3.0 tax program, our show received a 20% tax rebate on many non-above-the-line costs. Our pattern budget per episode was approximately $6.6 million. Based on that gross number, we got a rebate of about $760,000 per episode. In the end, our net budget was closer to $5.6 million. And at the end of season 1, our spend was approximately $100 million. After the rebate, our adjusted spend was closer to 88. So we were able to save a little over $11 million, roughly the cost of 2 full episodes. How did we spend the money? 72% went to labor, local cast and crew compensation. That's roughly $62 million. We had 590 full-time and part-time crew jobs. The remaining 28% was spent with local vendors on goods and services. That's about $24 million. Spent on local businesses. $4.6 million went to our background performers. Another $1.5 million went on food services. That's just direct impact. Then there's the indirect impact. That's the ripple effect of that money, which in turn stimulates additional economic activity. It's estimated that the procurements associated with the pit, season 1, stimulated $22.6 million in contributions to the state's GDP along the domestic supply chain. The show's expenditure on inputs of goods and services from locally based suppliers also stimulated 150 full-time jobs across California. The induced impact of our cast and crew spending, along with the workers along the supply chain, in turn stimulated even more economic growth, and it is estimated that the wage finance spending of local production crews and workers at locally based suppliers stimulated $40.3 million towards California's GDP during our production period. So, bottom line is that the estimated total impact of the first season of The Pit contributed around $125 million towards the state's GDP during our production period. That is proof of concept. That is replicable. And it is vital to the strength of our industry and to our city to support these incentives. They are an investment in our city's most precious commodity and its biggest asset. It is an investment in its people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for producing that show here in Burbank and Los Angeles, and thank you for keeping it here.
Pleasure, Senator. Thank you.
President Loeb, your opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Schiff and representatives. I want to thank you for this invitation to participate in this important hearing on behalf of our 170,000 behind-the-scenes entertainment workers of the IATSE. Film and television production creates good-paying, family-sustaining union jobs, and it's critical that Paramount Skydance's proposed purchase of Warner Brothers Discovery be evaluated from the perspective of American workers. The loss of any independently operating producer and distributor of film and television content could have profound impacts for entertainment workers. Over the last decade, we have seen American studios offshoring production at alarming rates. As regulators and elected officials consider the Paramount-Warner combination, we're asking that particular attention to be paid to ensuring that domestic production does not suffer further. When major companies merge, workers often pay the price first. IATSE's position is that regulators should consider the effect of consolidation on labor markets, not only on consumer prices. In 2023, IATSE and the Directors Guild of America issued joint comments in support of revised FTC DOJ merger guidelines, an important course correction that restored the federal government's ability to review the impact of consolidation and vertical integration in the entertainment industry on our members and other workers in the film and television industry. Past studio mergers have meant fewer jobs and disruptions to production. Redundancies following the Warner Brothers Discovery and Disney Fox mergers led to reductions in workforce that have the potential to occur downstream from a Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery merger. If Paramount Skydance is successful in their proposed acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, our primary interest is holding them accountable to the commitments they have made to Californian and American workers. CEO David Ellison has made a public commitment that Paramount Studios and Warner Brothers Studios will each produce a minimum of 15 high-quality feature films per year for a total at least 30 feature films annually. That level of production is needed in the United States if IATSE members are continued to be able to make a living in the industry. Work in the entertainment industry is precarious. It's primarily project or gig-based. Meaning most IATSE workers perform freelance work outside of what is considered regular employment. And we've been in the gig economy since 1893. Project-based work in film and television production can be as short as a day for a commercial shoot, multiple months for a film production, or a couple of years for a recurring television series. Entertainment workers can have multiple, if not dozens, of employers each year, and those workers rely on project-based job opportunities to support themselves and their families. Employment for below-the-line workers in Hollywood is down some 45 million hours per year since 2022. And according to the January 2026 ProdPro report, the U.S. share of global production has dropped from 52% to 38% during the same period. The American film and television industry faces an urgent threat from the international competition. Foreign governments have successfully lured film and television productions and the multitude of jobs they create away from the United States with aggressive tax incentives and subsidies. Films intended for initial release in the U.S. are increasingly being shot overseas, and American workers are paying the price. In just a few years, IATSE members have lost tens of thousands of jobs across the United States. That's thousands of families, small businesses, and communities across the country feeling the economic hardship of a shrinking industry. Movies and television shows created primarily for U.S. audiences are being produced abroad, not because of better talent or technology, but because other countries recognize the value of these productions and are offering robust financial incentives that the U.S. simply doesn't match. While U.S. states have offered tax credits for production in recent years, state incentives have not been enough to prevent productions from moving overseas. Without a comprehensive federal policy response, the U.S. risks turning its back on a signature American industry. Federal policymakers must act to level the playing field and make the U.S. film and television industry more competitive on the global stage. A globally competitive, labor-based and tax incentive for U.S. production that supplements state incentives is essential to return and maintain film and television jobs in America. IATSE is incredibly grateful to have champions like Senator Schiff and Representative Friedman and others working to solve this issue. Their strategic efforts have built momentum towards the introduction of a federal film and television production tax incentive, and IATSE will continue its tireless advocacy with Congress and the White House to achieve that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, President Loeb. Mr. Acosta, you're recognized for your statement.
Thank you, Senator, and I'd like to thank Senator Adam Schiff, the members of Congress here today, the City of Burbank, and their teams for inviting me to be a part of this spotlight hearing on the damage being done to our media in this country. And here is the breaking news. The news is broken. We may not be able to put the pieces back together again if the Paramount Warner Brothers Discovery merger goes through and puts my former home, CNN, under the control of the Ellison family. You see, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has cracked the code in how to hurt the press in America. You may recall Trump and his team seized my press pass during his first term. What is happening now goes way beyond that. As a former White House correspondent, an anchor for CNN, and a former correspondent for CBS News, I can only report to you what I see with my own eyes: an assault on our freedom of speech and the free press in America by the most powerful man in the world, who is taking us all down the road of Putin or China-style, state-dominated or state-controlled media in this country, owned by the oligarchs in service to Trump and MAGA, all in the name of special treatment for the wealthiest Americans at the expense of everyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, the news does not belong to the oligarchs. It belongs to us. Take a look at this Truth Social post from Trump just last weekend. Under a banner that reads, "President Trump is reshaping the media," he boasts about defunding PBS and NPR, as well as forcing anchors and hosts out of this nation's biggest TV networks. Trump brags he's gotten rid of the likes of Stephen Colbert, Lester Holt, Joy Reid, Chuck Todd, John Dickerson, and Terry Moran. It's funny that Trump is taking responsibility for these moves. Here I thought these were just, quote, programming decisions by the networks. Perhaps there is more to that story. And I should note there's even a mention of this reporter before you today. And while it is amusing to live rent-free in the head of the President of the United States, I must tell you what's more disturbing is what is laid out in the rest of this Trump post, because it matters to all of us. In the next section, under the subheading, Reforms, there are references to some of the latest troubling media moves made by one of the richest families in the world, the Ellisons, who were very close to Trump. And we can see that Truth Social post again. I can just point this out. One of the reforms listed reads, "Saved TikTok." Save TikTok, a nod to the Ellisons taking control of that popular social media platform. But go further. Under that logo, there are references to the new ownership of CNN and a news bias ombudsman for CBS. The Ellisons, who have recently purchased Paramount, the parent company of CBS, are rapidly expanding their media empire by making what appears to be a successful bid to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns CNN. That would put CNN, together with CBS and TikTok, under the control or influence of one family that is closely aligned with the White House. Just go right down the row there, right down the line there. There you have it, tic-tac-doe, or perhaps I should say tic-toc-doe. The Trump administration, should it approve the Paramount WBD merger, and it looks like they will, would be setting the table for a MAGA-friendly family to own an unprecedented amount of the news and information we consume in this country. That is not media consolidation, ladies and gentlemen. That is media domination. What's stopping that kind of media giant from gobbling up NBC or ABC next? This very real possibility, if realized, poses a danger to our democracy and the American dream. Just look at what has taken place at CBS since the Ellisons, you can lower that now, sorry about that. Just look at what has taken place at CBS since the Ellisons installed Barry Weiss as the head of the once fabled Tiffany Network. As I said, I used to work there. She has just this morning announced a crushing round of layoffs. The anchor she hired for the CBS Evening News closed one recent edition of that broadcast by saying, "Marco Rubio, we salute you." On another edition, he whitewashed the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and claimed there were two sides to the story of that day. That's in addition to the disclosure that 60 Minutes had temporarily shelved a segment on the infamous Seacot prison in El Salvador that is used by the Trump administration to lock up migrant detainees. Ladies and gentlemen, when 60 Minutes is in trouble, we're all in trouble. It is not a stretch to say we would likely see the same kinds of MAGA-friendly editorial decisions should the Ellisons take control of CNN. That's exactly what the Trump administration wants. As one of my former colleagues at CNN just told me earlier this week, they're not worried about hitting the iceberg. They now see the iceberg, and they're bracing for impact. Just last week, as the senator mentioned, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth slammed a report from some of my former colleagues at CNN shedding light on the Iran war by saying this, and I quote, "The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better." Add to that what the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, tweeted last weekend, threatening broadcasters they could lose their licenses over how they report on the war in Iran. Folks, they're saying the quiet part out loud. All of this is on top of the multi-million-dollar settlements paid out by CBS and ABC to Trump in just the last year. That $15 million payment by ABC to Trump also got a mention in that Truth Social post. And what did that accomplish? As we all remember, Trump's FCC attempted to silence Jimmy Kimmel anyway. In the case of CBS, executives handed over their extortion money as the network was being pursued by Paramount, a sale that was pending at the time before the Trump administration. The public, folks, they can sniff out what's going on here. I talk about it every day on my podcast. These payments are part of a shakedown paid to a wannabe dictator who wants the government to determine who delivers the news. Add to that the recent arrests of Don Lemon, other journalists, the banning of the Associated Press from the Oval Office, the devastating layoffs at the Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos, the Nexstar-Tegna merger, the right-wing propaganda peddled on X owned by Elon Musk, and don't forget the OG Trump state media outlet, Fox News and their imitators, Newsmax and OAN. And if all of that sounds like hyperbole, consider this. The respected expert on authoritarianism, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, recently told me Trump is consolidating the media at a rate that is far ahead where Vladimir Putin was during his early years in power. In Russia, they aren't getting the real deal on what is happening in Ukraine. Imagine handing that kind of power to Donald Trump when it comes to matters of war and peace in America. As is noted in his deranged yet revealing Truth Social post, Trump is winning his war on the media. That is because, in part, the least courageous and most powerful members of the industry are allowing it to happen. Trump will keep going after the media because he wants the news to become lies. You can't speak truth to power, folks, if those in power can crush the truth. Go around the world. Go around the world and look at the countries that don't have a free press. They are not places where you want to live. Now, we can't go back in time and stiffen the spines of media executives, but we can stop this merger and the subjugation of CNN and other journalists in this country to the likes of the Ellisons and the oligarchs. Yes, Trump put me on his media hit list, but I'm proud to report to the president that I'm still here, loving the freedom of independent media. I'm here today because I can freely speak to all of you now. As I said during my last broadcast on CNN, and I think it applies today, this is no time to bow down to a tyrant. Don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to the fear. Hold on to the truth and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costa.
Thank you.
We'll now recognize Mr. Luca for your opening statement.
It will be hard to follow that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Schiff and representatives. It's a real honor to be here, so thank you for inviting us. My name is Jax DeLuca, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Future Film Coalition. We represent a nationwide network of filmmakers, producers, film workers, distributors, sales agents, film festivals, and independent movie theaters. And our members operate across every stage of the film and media supply chain. And these are small businesses that are rooted in communities across the United States. These are also workers and enterprises that form the backbone of the U.S. film and television industry, which contributes more than $200 billion to the U.S. economy. And despite this contribution, many are increasingly asking whether or not they can continue to make a living in this industry. So our coalition exists to educate policymakers like you about the realities of the industry, because this is not only a cultural priority, but an economic and strategic one, which you all have mentioned. The United States, as you know, represents the world's leading exporter of film and television. This makes our media ecosystem a central driver of American soft power and global influence. Ensuring that this ecosystem remains competitive and accessible should be a bipartisan priority. And further, this is not just a cultural issue. This is about jobs, small businesses, and local economies in every state. Years of rapid consolidation have dramatically reduced the number of buyers, distributors, and commissioning platforms available to independent creators and distributors. And we're hearing consistently how this affects them. Consolidation trends are increasingly concentrating control over financing and commissioning decisions. This also affects intellectual property ownership and opportunities for long-term revenue. This also affects distribution access and discoverability, marketing capital, and audience reach. This also affects exhibition windows and downstream licensing. So this reflects a market where a small number of dominant players dictate terms. And when these dominant players consolidate, they continue to gain leverage to push down wages, restrict ownership, and limit access to opportunities for workers and for audiences. This is the core reason why we launched the Block the Merger campaign. And this is to document everyday stories of how consolidation is affecting the ecosystem in real time. Because the people who are often the most impacted are often the ones that are missing in this conversation. We also know that the consolidation among major studios has already narrowed distribution pathways and concentrated control. And the proposed Warner Brothers Discovery Paramount transaction would combine two of the largest entertainment companies in the world, further consolidating control over content libraries, networks, streaming platforms, and production pipelines. And we've seen how this plays out. The Live Nation Ticketmaster merger offers a clear example. And control across the supply chain can limit access and disadvantage independent competitors. And while some supporters of mergers often point to efficiencies, these efficiencies often become gatekeeping. And when one company has the ability to control what gets financed, what gets distributed, and what gets seen, it also gains the ability to favor its own content and shape the market in ways that reduce competition. And the harms of increased consolidation also start before audiences ever even see a film. And when fewer buyers are competing to commission, acquire, or license projects, this means fewer projects are greenlit or financed, fewer workers are hired, and fewer films reach distribution at scale. And for audiences, again, this means fewer choices, not just in quantity, but in the range of stories and perspectives that reach the public, particularly outside the largest media markets. By the time audiences notice fewer options, which is now, the pipeline has already narrowed. As you all have mentioned, small businesses make up a majority of this ecosystem, and many of them are being squeezed out. More than 90% of the businesses in this sector are small enterprises, and many with under 10 employees. And these are the local crews and vendors that are in your districts, and the local cinemas in your community, and the independent distributor who's trying to get a new award-winning film to an audience. These are the people that we're hearing from through the Block the Merger campaign, and many have offered insight on what it's like to negotiate in this environment. What we've heard is you either accept the terms or the low rates, or you lose the work. And small businesses do not survive conditions like this. They disappear. Less competition also means consumers will face higher prices across cable, streaming, and theater admission. And at the same time, fewer of these award-winning films will actually reach their screens, which results in a narrower range of content and fewer meaningful choices for audiences. So in closing, we must ensure that the film industry and the local economies tied to it are not sacrificed for corporate scale and control. A stronger Hollywood is built not through consolidation, but through competition, fair markets, and policies that sustain independent storytelling. And on behalf of the Future Film Coalition, our allied organizations, and including the International Documentary Association, Art House Convergence, and the Archival Producers Alliance, we urge policymakers to fully scrutinize this merger and to consider its effects across the entire supply chain, not just on consumers. We also ask that you actively solicit advice and input from our representatives who are working within the film and media supply chain. This can help you gather on-the-ground perspectives and learn more about the stark realities of this industry. And lastly, we ask for you to prioritize policies to mitigate the existing harms to competition, labor, and local production ecosystems. This includes supporting public infrastructure and a national film board and more incentives that are designed specifically for independent, non-studio backed film. Because shockingly, Of the 100 production-heavy countries in the world, we're the only one without a federal film office. And of the 80 that have federal incentives, we are the only one that doesn't. We're already in a reactionary stance, and this is a critical point. Are we going to be a global leader in this industry or leave billions on the table and hundreds of thousands of talented, trained, and experienced American workers out of a job? Thank you.
Ms. DeLuca, thank you for your testimony, and I want to acknowledge the presence of Attorney General Rob Bonta of California. We're very glad to have you here, and thank you for your important work on this issue. I'll recognize myself for the first round of questions. Mr. Wiley, tell us about the decision to film here, to film The Pit here in Los Angeles. Were there pressures to move this production out of the country or to other states? How was the decision to film here made? And how would a federal tax incentive on top of the state tax incentive, how would that affect the industry?
Well, I'll speak from personal experience and say that I haven't slept in my own bed in 15 years while I've been working as an actor since the end of ER. I've chased tax credits with jobs that have chased tax credits to Oregon, Louisiana, New Mexico, Vancouver, Toronto. I've worked everywhere. It's hard on families. I can speak to that. It's hard to fracture your industry that way. The tax incentive makes a huge difference because it's an investment in the infrastructure that's been here generationally. I had an opportunity to witness the signing of the $750 million tax incentive when Governor Newsom signed it. And I embarrassed one of our crew members. Well, I think I'm going to embarrass him again. His name is Rob Neri, and he's our special effects coordinator on The Pit. And his father was a special effects coordinator, and his grandfather was a special effects coordinator who worked on the Three Stooges. And when you hire Rob Neri, you get 3 generations of special effects coordinating expertise. You know, most people have forgotten more about special effects than the Neri family will ever. You know what I mean by that. The point being is that you can put up a soundstage in any other state, but they don't come with a Rob Neri. You know, the one thing that Los Angeles has been able to offer is generational talent, homegrown here for over 100 years. This is the incubator of this industry, and the talent pool is immense. So the tax credit, augmented by a federal tax incentive, makes this competitive again and brings that work back to Los Angeles. A lot of that work that's leaving the state is understandable. A lot of the work that's leaving the country is cautionary because as a 3-card union holder, a lot of that work also circumvents some of that union protections and privileges that we've also been fighting for 100 years to maintain. So this is an important issue for a lot of reasons. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm still trying to figure out the special effects in the Three Stooges.
Apologies.
Sure, there.
Most people have. Let's see if I can nail that one, land that plane. The Neris have forgotten more about special effects than most people ever learn, I think is what I was trying to say.
We knew exactly what you meant, Doctor.
Rob Neri will now embarrass me all next season for this moment. Yes.
President Loeb, we've heard studios that were in the process of merging make commitments before. What has the actual experience been of the industry? Have those commitments been honored? And if they haven't, how do we exact commitments that can actually be upheld? You make a very good point about the 30 productions. It's one thing to say you'll produce 30 theatrical releases. It's another to say you'll do the production in the United States. That was not included in the commitment made by Paramount. How do we get commitments that we can insist upon?
Well, I think that we're going to have to, be competitive to get them to say anything specific. And, in the last 2 years, Paramount, Skydance, and Warner Brothers only made 15 films, motion pictures, in the United States, 5 of which had parts shot outside of the United States. And a commitment to 30 pictures doesn't mean anything unless they're done here. The big missing piece is that there is no commitment about where they're going to shoot 30 films. And we also should not forget about the importance of television, and my colleague mentioned 590 jobs on a TV show. So, I think that, I don't know if there's a policy matter where you can nail down those commitments. I think measuring what they actually do after they've made these commitments is going to be really important, especially in the short term. And the other issue that I've got with this is that they're committing for a year. What is the future going to look like, if we don't put a tax incentive in place? So I don't know that you can enforce or somehow, get these commitments to be real, but I think the economics of a tax incentive will allow them to satisfy the commitments that they did make.
Thank you. Mr. Costa, given your experience at CNN and at CBS, you are an ideal witness on the subject of editorial independence and the free press, which is under assault to a degree we have never seen in this country. What's happening at CBS, and what should it tell us about what will happen to CNN if the same management takes over that institution?
Well, Senator, as I stated in my remarks, and just this morning, the staff at CBS News received a note from Barry Weiss and the president of CBS News informing them of this massive round of layoffs, which is going to really cripple that news organization, that same news division I worked for many years ago, the same news division of Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and Edward R. Murrow. And it is now under the ownership of a family that is very closely aligned with Donald Trump. And so there are a couple of things that I think will happen. One is, if this same family is allowed to own CNN, they will combine those two news organizations, and we'll see another round of massive layoffs that will put journalists out of work, and not just the folks who are on the air, the photographers like the ones that we see here, producers who work behind the scenes, technical crews who put these shows on the air, bureaus that are located around the world. Look what Jeff Bezos has done with the Washington Post, closing bureaus and offices in places around the world that are now very important to the news that we're getting today. And the other, I think, more disturbing aspect of this is that you basically have partisan hacks running CBS News. And they, as I said earlier in my comments, shelved a piece on 60 Minutes about the notorious Seacott prison. And we all remember those images of Secretary Kristi Noem standing in front of those cages filled with human beings. Some of them were migrants who were wrongfully detained by this administration and treated like animals. And 60 Minutes, I know that some of the people who put that piece together, they were told that they couldn't air that story because they had to find administration officials to comment. Those administration officials are available to comment at any given moment. And they eventually put that piece on the air. But imagine those kinds of editorial decisions moving over to CNN, the nation's 24-hour news network. Those kinds of editorial decisions will send a chilling effect throughout that news organization. And Senator, I don't have to explain to you what the effect of that might be. We'll get into the business of journalists self-editing, self-censoring programs saying, well, we better pull our punches here. We don't want to get in trouble with the bosses. We don't want to lose our jobs. And that affects the news and information that everybody receives today. And so, there's a lot of talk of busting up big tech. I think we're going to have to start having the conversation about busting up big media, because this is not America, what we're witnessing right now. This is very close to what is going on in Russia and Hungary and other authoritarian countries where they have successfully consolidated their news media. And it's the kind of news that the government wants you to hear and see. I tell the story all the time about, my dad is a Cuban refugee. He came over to this country 3 weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And just just a few years ago, we were able to go back and visit Cuba. He'd always wanted to go back. And it was around the time of the death of Fidel Castro. And at that time, the death of Fidel Castro was being reported by the Cuban state media as the physical disappearance of Fidel Castro, not the death of Fidel, the physical disappearance. Do we want that kind of news in America? My dad didn't come to this country so this country could become like Cuba.
Thank you. And I'll note, although it's beyond the scope of this hearing, we saw the news today that Nexstar has been approved for a merger,
That's right.
which will consolidate local broadcasting well above the 39% mark to 60%, and that without really any public input, any analysis, or anything more. Representative Friedman, for your questions.
Well, I want to thank everyone again for being here, and particularly the senator for putting this together. This is truly one of the most important issues in Los Angeles right now. And this runs the gamut from, as Mr. Acosta was saying, freedom of the press and what people around the country and around the world get to see reported about this administration and future administrations. Whether we have state-sponsored media or state that approves or disapproves of media, or whether we have journalists who can truly follow the story and then be able to reach an audience because they have a broadcaster that will air their story around the world, all the way to the economics of Los Angeles. So first, I want to ask Mr. Loeb, just to go to the labor piece of this. In terms of films and budgets of films and television, approximately, do you have a sense of what the budget of a project goes to labor, what goes out into the economy in terms of spends outside of the studio, kind of how do these productions impact the LA economy?
Well, as far as labor is concerned, I think it sort of varies dramatically, especially in television, where I think at the beginning there are lower costs above the line. Those go up after a certain number of years of success. But percentage-wise, I mean, I would guess labor, 50, 60% of a budget. I would say that, it affects the economy in a lot of ways because we have, for instance, lost health coverage for 16,000 people. And so how does that affect the economy? How do those people take care of themselves and their families and go to the emergency room instead of their doctors? And, that's sort of a compounding effect. Certainly there's no tax revenue coming for the state when workers, have no jobs. And in fact, I think there's an extra drag there because of the payment of unemployment and other social programs to support them. And I can tell you that, we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars bridging benefits for people. This is a huge issue for us. But, since COVID, then, strikes and fires and a slowdown, the plans have spent reserves that are meant for this, for these times. But all of those things, I think, depress the economy overall and change communities. And if you can't pay the bills, there are a lot of ancillary problems that are caused.
Thank you. And how many members do you have in the United States?
In the U.S., I would say 130,000. There are probably 50,000 IATSE motion picture workers in the state of California.
And then outside of IATSE, how many entertainment unions are there? About. Sorry, I'm not trying to quiz you.
No,
We can count them up.
I can remember this. So you have a SAG-AFTRA, the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild. You have the Teamsters and us, so that's 5. And then there are other unions that work on the studio lots, the basic crafts, that maintain the lots and do certain things on the sets. So 7 or 8.
So we're talking
My
a lot of
guys
people.
will-
This is a huge industry across California
Huge.
and across the United States. So you have actors, You've got creative people, but you also have truck drivers, you have craftspeople, you have carpenters, you have all sorts of people working across a variety of different crafts and trades. Not to mention, like I said before, those ancillary businesses, the coffee shops around the studios, the caterers who service the film industry, the electricians who work on set but also off set. There's so many people out there. This is a real signature American industry that's aspirational. You know, people come from around the country to come to Hollywood. They come from around the world to come to the United States to work in this industry. And these are good jobs, union jobs that are aspirational, good-paying jobs, right? Not dead-end, you know, kind of. I mean, there's value in all labor, but people study to do this, and they dream of it, right?
Yeah, and we're in artistic and technical trades that require talent and training and keeping up with things. Of course, we're going to face the challenge of AI along with all of this,
Right.
To compound our problems. But these are good, solid jobs. And even when you talk about actors, when you talk about extras, these people, need these jobs and these basic benefits as well. So we're not just talking about our folks. These are solid middle-class jobs that our contracts provide meaningful health care coverage and hopefully a dignified retirement.
Right, and it used to be that, Los Angeles really was one of the only places you could really locate it. Post-production houses were here, the special effects, the studios, the lighting.
Was it
shops.
something I said?
Hearing after dark.
I think you neglected to mention the lighting crew.
Yeah.
And
Did the Ellisons buy the power company, Senator?
Oh, no.
Where are the cocktails? Where are the cocktails?
Just a second.
Somebody leaned on it.
Okay.
It's Burbank, okay?
But over the years, there's been, as Mr. Wiley was talking about, a lot of these productions have gone overseas. And I was here in LA when the company I was working at first started sending productions to Canada. And at the time, they brought a lot of the crew with them. They brought a lot of folks because they didn't have them there. But over time, those other countries have started to stand up their own people. They have their own craft people. They've created their own infrastructure. So my question for both of you is it too late? And given that the California Film Tax Credit, which I'm very proud to have been an author of and played a role in, has been successful in bringing shows like The Pit back to LA, how much will the National Film Tax Credit be a multiplier? Can we still now compete with these other countries, or is it kind of too late for the United States?
That's for me first?
That's for both, yeah.
So I don't think it's too late. And I will just give a quick example of a different state that had a robust film incentive in Georgia. And it was among the least expensive places with their tax incentive and their rates and cost of living that you could shoot a bona fide, big picture in the United States of America. They shot, I want to say, 13 big tentpole movies there, employed thousands of people, and another country in the UK came up with a better incentive, and they pulled up the stakes and left. Thousands of people lost their staple employment. Having said that, it happened overnight, which is shocking and sad, but they moved it that fast, and it can come back that fast. You're talking about project-based productions, that end. I suppose, I'm told that there's a 10-year deal with Pinewood. I don't know exactly, what the details of that are to get out of it if our incentive competes. But I do think the industry is nimble, and I do think that there is hope to bring the work back.
Mr. Wiley, from the artist perspective, do people want to come back?
Absolutely. The old green
Everyone's
button.
a
Thank you very
director
much.
here.
A lot of what I think the Pit's success is attributed to is the culture that goes into the making of the Pit. And a lot of that culture is predicated on people being grateful for the opportunity to work and go home every night and have dinner with their families and be proud of the work they're doing and have it feel like it reflects well on them. you want your work to have meaning and you want it to have value. And the one thing that we've set out to do from the outset with the pit is to create an environment that is inclusive and varied, where everybody's opinion matters, where we take the work seriously, we don't take ourselves seriously. But it became this like submarine that we could all hide in for the last 2 years and remember what it's like to be good at something and to enjoy being good at something and to enjoy inspiring that in your coworkers. So I'm only speaking from the limited frame of reference of stage 22 on the Warner Brothers lot when I say it's not only possible, it's replicable. It's what we do better than anybody else in the world. And it can happen.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Senator Schiff, for holding this event. Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah. I hit the right green button. And of course, Congresswoman Friedman also. Congressman Correa out of Orange County, California. We're actually home to the original Disneyland, Anaheim, California. We employ probably 40,000 people at that park. Direct, probably 30, 40 unions represent those workers. Good paying jobs. When I was in state senate, also state legislature, big priority of mine, middle class, good paying jobs. And Laura, like you, I think all of us would co-author that tax credit at the state level, as we should. Mr. Luca, you said something that caught my interest. You said, can you survive in the industry? And I'm watching graduates of our top film schools in Southern California can't find jobs. One particular individual I know ended up being homeless, sleeping in their car. Finally just left the business and moved on to something else. So I would argue that we're already way behind. We're not providing the opportunities or the incentives for the future generation of filmmakers to come forward. I kind of get the feeling that we're continue to be very reactive. We continue to essentially rely on American film reputation for being the best in the world. We're getting our heads handed to us. Mergers, federal incentives around the world, AI, you name it. We're always reacting. We're not ahead of the curve here, and it's going to hurt us even more than it has already. I'm going to ask each one of you, starting out with Mr. Loeb, what is it that we can do to put together a proactive plan so we're not chasing our tails here? We're actually getting ahead. We're talking about the merger right now. We're talking about drafting a federal incentive. But as you're pointing out, maybe how do we make sure that it's written in a way that production actually stays in the U.S., and it's not 1 year, but a number of years, so we get back on track and keep production in the United States? A plan. How do we do this proactively?
Well, I have some ideas. Some of them may seem half-baked, but maybe you're not entitled to a...
It's better than no bake, but we have time to write
not fully
these
cooked.
legislation.
Yeah, look, I think that a commitment, maybe should be made to, have some trigger to who's eligible for these pictures. I mean, there's a total lack of patriotism isn't an issue. It's not going to be part of this. Either is charity. It's going to all be about dollars. And so ways that restrict access to those dollars for folks that aren't, doing the right thing here as far as placing projects in the United States, and especially, here in Hollywood where the epicenter is something to think about. And I know that sounds punitive, and my hope would be there wouldn't be a necessary piece of it. But there is no guarantee, because it's a race to the bottom with these incentives elsewhere. And, I've been watching this for years. We organized in the southeastern United States back in the 90s, which was not a very ripe place for a Jewish labor organizer from Cleveland to be sent. But I got sent there, and we did it. And we got it done with the benefits, with the advantages of the union contracts. But I think that these commitments are largely hollow without probably some kind of economic trigger, right? Because if it's all about money at the end of the day, we'll get some of them back. I've had a lot of folks tell me if the kind of incentive that Senator Schiff is authoring is passed, that it would bring a lot of work back, but the commitments they're not enforceable, solid commitments. And I gave you the examples of these, the amount of work that actually happens here. So the amount of production that's going to happen globally in comparison to the amount of work that's going to happen here has to be looked at closely.
Mr. Wiley?
I would only add that you could lift the restrictions on the tax credit. You could.
No, you have to press the button again, I think.
The green button.
It's becoming a running gag. I would only add that you could lift the restrictions on the incentives in California. You can make a commitment to have them be for several years in advance so you could build them into your economic planning. You could really play up the fact that there's a 1 to 24 multiplying factor to every dollar spent in film production has a $24 ancillary effect in local businesses. That's really significant. Aside from that, I would agree with
Mr. Luca?
I'm glad you asked. This is something that Future Film Coalition has been looking at, and some of the things that we recommend are having quotas, and ones that also have a mandated percentage for non-studio backed films, and also make sure that there's a floor for where it retains local workforce and local vendors, and I think that's all really important. And our colleagues at Film USA, which is the national service organization for film commissioners, they also would love to be part of making those recommendations, so I would refer you to them as well.
And Mr. Costa?
I personally would love to make an endorsement, if I could, for tax incentives for creating independent news media in this country. Imagine if we could start standing up some real competition.
Excellent.
To the corporate and legacy media in this country, and not just hold the president's feet to the fire, but maybe hold some of these media titans' feet to the fire too.
Thank you very much. And just one.
Could I make a quick plug, actually, before we move on? Because what you hit on is actually really important, because right now we're at this moment where we're talking about film, we're talking about television, we're talking about streaming, we're talking about journalism, but all of that's affected when we're talking about this issue. And so we need to be looking at that big picture. And my Shorenstein Fellowship at the Harvard Kennedy School right now is doing a lot of this work. So it also just doubling up on what Jim has said, we definitely need to make sure that these incentives cover the full range of media content.
And follow up, just a quick question for Mr. Loeb. Is this merger going to create jobs in Southern California? I think I got my answer.
I don't know. I am hopeful, but in the absence of the tax incentive piece, I am skeptical. And
Thank you
that's
very
just
much.
history.
Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Representative Kamlanger-Dove.
Thank you, Senator and Congresswoman Friedman, for putting on this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I represent the 37th Congressional District, so all of the studios that are not in Laura's Friedman's district, the remaining studios are in my district. I also sit on House Judiciary and House Foreign Affairs, so I think this issue is a nexus point for both of those committees. And I just want to say that, my mother's an actor, and so this industry is incredibly important to me. It is about the long-term health of LA's economy as well as the entertainment industry. And it goes beyond the obvious. I have a friend, Mo, she's been in the business for over 30 years, card-carrying actor, and she told me this will be the first time in her career as an actor that she will not have health insurance because there are just not enough union jobs, and how scary that is for her trying to raise a family. Being LA, I also get acupuncture. And after my acupuncturist took the needles out of my back, she said, "Can you do anything to help bring back entertainment jobs?" So it goes to show you it's just beyond the folks working craft services and tailoring. It is jobs, jobs, jobs everywhere. So, Mr. Wiley, you have been in this business for a very long time, you said, as both an actor and as a producer. And can you share with us, over your tenure in the business, how have you seen the terms of the deals change for you?
The terms of the deals change.
Because of mergers, because of consolidations, because of less jobs?
Well, I'm going to show my age when I say this, but if you entered into this business in the 80s, it was a business that was subsidized by advertising and subscriptions, and it was manageable. And then the business continued to grow with the advent of streaming, and there seemed to be this idea that you could have unlimited growth turn into profit. And then suddenly that proved to be not true, and everybody went looking for profit, and you went back to advertising and subscriptions as the way of sustaining it. So we've watched this industry explode, and now we've watched it constrict. If you entered the business in the last 8 or 10 years, you've seen 2/3 of the jobs go away. If you entered the business 25 years ago, you've seen it self-correct back to something that's manageable. There's only two ways to pay for this content at the end of the day: advertising and subscriptions. And we tend to kind of reinvent that wheel every 10 or 15 years, but it comes at the cost of labor. Usually these consolidations are really great for shareholders and not usually great for the labor force. So that's the sort of arc that I've experienced. But these tax incentives are significant. I'll share an anecdote from an executive producer I worked with years ago named Dean Devlin, who took advantage of the Oregon tax credit the first year it was offered to take a show called Leverage up to Portland. And he paid out all of his per diem that first season, all the cast and crew, in $2 bills, which was cumbersome and annoying and confusing, and nobody liked it. But a year later, when that tax bill came up for renewal, Dean went to testify in front of the State Department and at the Capitol asked if anybody had seen a $2 bill that year. And if they had one in their wallet, would they hold it up? And several people in that room did. And it was like putting a contrast dye system into an X-ray. You got to see exactly how that Hollywood money bled into that economy. And it was a really wonderful demonstrative way of saying that, this money doesn't just get shared internally, it gets disseminated locally, globally.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
So when I was a cub, long time ago, I worked on Gone in 60 Seconds. And if you don't believe me, I have a credit. But I would spend lunch, President Loeb, eating with your members. And I can recall so many stories of these folks sharing with pride how because of this industry, they were able to provide for their family and put kids through college. And it was because of consistent production, even if it was gig to gig. Some folks have mentioned streaming and streaming platforms. So President Loeb, can you sort of share how the rise of streaming platforms have changed the work for your members?
Yeah, thank you. We, originally when streaming was brought to us at the bargaining table, it was characterized as a kind of new media, which lasted decades, so it wasn't new media at the end. And we really spent a lot of time bargaining to turn our contracts for television and those provisions that new media was eroding or cannibalizing, into the standard terms. And we did get there. But I think one thing that we really had to work on, and it had to do with residuals, and that has to do with intellectual property. And we're not triggering residuals when a picture gets made outside the United States, and that's a serious liability to the benefit plans. So, we've held our own in the streaming, and the contracts have matured. I think we did very well in the last cycle, but it's really about the work and the triggering of those payments for security to the members.
Thank you. And I have one last question. It will be quick for Ms. DeLuca. So, Paramount bought BET and then kind of sold it all off and gutted it. And as an African-American woman, for me, that's sort of one of the premier platforms for Black storytelling. And we're seeing those outlets shrink more and more across many spaces. And yet we know that audiences are demanding more authentic and diverse storytelling. And even though many still report feeling misrepresented. So are you already seeing this squeeze play happen for independent and diverse creators? And if so, can you share what that is looking like?
Absolutely. You are correct. When big media companies merge, there are fewer places, especially for independent films, to be bought or shown. And just learning actually what it's like to be an independent filmmaker, bringing their film through a marketplace, in itself is very complicated. But to just give you a sense of that, there were filmmakers who were award-winning films or nominated for Oscars this year, and those films are having a hard time getting picked up. And that's not just because a large studio doesn't want to pick them up and distribute them. There are these intermediaries that will buy and acquire these films and then license the rights for those films. But some of them know if they take on that film, a streamer's not going to take it, so it won't get distributed at sale. So this really all comes down to the varying types of ways films get distributed. There's theatrical release in theaters. There's the premium video on demand. There's the pay-one streaming license, which historically had been the way that films make a lot of that money. And then there's the downstream markets. And that would be also where you would get that long-term revenue from international and television rights. But all of this has been getting stripped away. So it's harder and harder for someone who wants to take a gamble on a film to actually know that they'll be able to recoup expenses. But also, if a film has to do with political content or something that they might think might be a conflict of interest with one of these larger conglomerates, they're not going to pick it up because they know that it's not going to make it into a pay-one deal. So there's also these extremely complex ways that films that are amazing films are just never getting seen when you open up your streaming platform on the television. But also, there's a lot of algorithmic gatekeeping. It costs a lot of money to actually have your films, if you're not one of the studio-backed films, be in that front window, in that like curatorial window. So it's a pretty complicated system. And we do go over that in great detail in our statement, which ended up being around 40 pages because we have so many different parts of the field that are represented, but everybody was helping. And I think this is how important this is. So please look at that statement because we do walk through all of those nuances.
Mr. Chair, could I ask Jim Acosta? Okay. So I love that visual that you showed. And we've also sort of tried to gut voices of America. And so I would argue we're turning ourselves into a propaganda state. And investigative reporting is under attack, I think we are trying to snuff it out. So can you sort of share how potential mergers like this and what you're seeing so far, how this is making Americans less safe, if you think it is?
No, I do. And I mean, I think case in point, we just saw this, was it last weekend? Or maybe it was 2 weekends ago when Donald Trump attended the dignified transfer of those soldiers who came back who had lost their lives over in the Middle East. And on Fox, on the Fox News program Fox and Friends that weekend, they carried it live. And as we all remember, because all of the networks were carrying it live, Donald Trump wore a baseball cap at the dignified transfer. The baseball cap said USA on it. A lot of military families thought that that was disrespectful, that he would wear a baseball cap to a dignified transfer. It was blowing up on social media. And then what did Fox do in later broadcasts as they were talking about what took place at that dignified transfer? They pulled video from their archives of a similar dignified transfer that had happened last year, and they were playing that instead and saying, here's Donald Trump at the dignified transfer. The reason why that occurred is because in the other video that they pulled from 2025, he wasn't wearing the baseball cap. It wasn't this offensive display that was seen live by people who happened to watch it at that moment. Imagine if all of the networks or most of the networks in this country were under the umbrella of a MAGA-friendly oligarchical family, and all we were watching was not the reality of what took place. I mean, I think that is just one example of the dangers that we're facing. And I mean, look what's taken place at 60 Minutes. My former colleague Anderson Cooper has left that program. The folks inside 60 Minutes, some of the people I know there, they're very worried about what's taking place. That is the industry standard. That is the news magazine of record for the United States. It's so popular that Australia has its own version of 60 Minutes and so on. Imagine a Trump-friendly, MAGA-friendly 60 Minutes from here on out. It's just wrong. And to see that kind of editorial decision-making from the top down, from that kind of right-wing hackery, is not going to be good for anybody. And I would argue it does make us less safe. If the American people cannot see the costs of the war in the Middle East because it's being sanitized for people in this country, then, how can we make the right decision when it comes to these kinds of matters of war and peace?
Thank you. We have a hard out at noon, but we have time for a lightning round. But members will have to keep their questions short, including this member. But it does seem the appropriate time, since my colleagues have shared their own personal experiences in the industry, that I share mine. As a young lawyer, I wrote 3 screenplays and was represented by William Morris. This fact came to the president's attention to the point where he once referred to me as a failed screenwriter. I told my team, he doesn't realize what a great favor he's doing me. Half my constituents are failed screenwriters. They're going to think he's just like me. Mr. Wyle, what would you tell a young person who wants to go into the industry? Not to be a star necessarily, but to be a writer, to be a set designer, to work in wardrobe, to be a carpenter in the industry. What would you say to them if they were trying to enter now? What hope could you give them?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I have been asked to speak at a few graduation ceremonies and to a few acting classes, and I usually start by saying cynically, we don't want you. We don't need you. We're full. And they're not jobs for you. And if you're going to come and try and displace one of my friends or me, you better be really good, because we don't want to go willingly. It's cynical.
That's a heck of a pep talk.
But it's also my way of challenging them to say, this is not an easy life. This is not an entitlement. This is almost like a penance or a sentence in some cases. And you should do it only if you can't do anything else. But if you do want to do it, you will find any way to do it. You will not let anybody stop you from the pursuit of doing it. And that's really the truth. I mean, art is going to continue to get made, whether it's subsidized by the state or on the federal level, whether it's shown on TV or in a movie theater. It may go direct to consumer as a result of all of this. And a new paradigm will be created, but artists will always make art, and if you're committed to doing it, you should always try.
We're very grateful for your commitment.
Thank you, sir.
And the excellence you bring to it. Representative Friedman.
Thank you. And I don't know if we're having closing statements or not, but I will just say one thing about the tax credit. I'm glad that we talked a lot about it today, because we know that it's worked in California. It has brought production back here. People are working now in Los Angeles who weren't working a few years ago. And so we know it works. We know how important this is, and we can do this nationwide. We have enough states that understand the importance of this production that we can get this done, and I'm determined to work on that. And I also want to say, for people who might be a little cynical, that we give tax credits to many industries. Hollywood is not asking for special treatment, whether it is computer chips or the energy sector or R&D for pharmaceuticals. This is something that is standard in the United States across industries that we have determined that we care about and that have a benefit for jobs and also for something greater in terms of our nation. And Hollywood and its ability to tell the story of America is something that's worth saving. And so I'm hoping that we, have the support, but it's something that I know that Senator Schiff and I and many of our colleagues are determined to get done for Los Angeles and for the nation. And I do have a question for Mr. Acosta, and I really thank you for being here with your years of experience in the news industry. Is what's happening now from the Trump administration and their very outward attempt to go after news media that they feel is unfriendly to them, Is that something that is typical and normal? I think sometimes we hear from them that the legacy media has always done this, that they're somehow freeing them up. Is that your perspective? Is there anything normal about this?
No, there's nothing normal about it. And to borrow some medical terminology from our colleague Noah's show, I mean, the patient is on the operating table right now and is in critical condition. And my concern is that if we keep going down this road, it's going to be lights out for the news in this country, for the truth in this country. Just this morning, Donald Trump was praising Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, for going after what he calls the fake news in this country. And I happen to be the reporter who he called fake news. He originally called me fake news back at a news conference in 2017, and then later the enemy of the people. I wear those labels as a badge of honor. But folks, we are not going to be in a good place in this country if we turn the press, if we turn journalists in this country into the enemy of the people. As I like to tell folks, we are not the enemy of the people. We love the people. We want to tell their stories, just like the storytellers who are here today. We're defenders of the people. But folks who say, "Oh, this is because you're a liberal hack. That's why you're saying these things." This is not about Democrat or Republican. I don't think the problem today is left versus right. It's truth versus lies, and we cannot give into these lies. And my sense of it right now is that we are heading down a path that we're not going to be able to come back from, and that's why we need to have media options that are not controlled by the wealthiest and most powerful interests of this country. They need to be controlled by the people. They need to be led by the people. One of my favorite options there on the media diet is public broadcasting, PBS and NPR. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my friends in public broadcasting. Donald Trump, in that Truth Social post that I put up there, he celebrates defunding PBS and NPR. In Washington, Senator Schiff's familiar with the station WETA, which is the local PBS station. They only can afford to do a newscast, the PBS NewsHour, 5 days a week. They had to cancel the weekend edition of the PBS NewsHour. How are people being served in a lot of far-flung places around this country who might identify with Donald Trump and his politics when those kinds of options are being taken away? And so this is a full frontal assault on every type of media option that we have in this country. They are gobbling up the newspapers and the TV stations. The senator mentioned the Nexstar Tegna deal, and they're going after the networks. And this is right out of Project 2025. And if we don't wake up, there's not going to be a Project 2027 or 2029 for the rest of us. Look what he's doing with the elections in this country, sending the director of national intelligence down to Fulton County and going after their ballots there and so on. And so this is, it's not just an assault on the media or on journalists, it's on our democracy itself. Walter Cronkite, the legendary anchor of the CBS Evening News, he used to say that the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy.
Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I served back in Washington on Judiciary Committee on the Antitrust Subcommittee. So I'm going to ask you, what message should I take back to that committee that we should deliver to the DOJ as they review this merger? More specifically, if they approve this merger, what are the guardrails that we should put on this merger? Mr. Lowe.
I think that certainly the comments about the media, I mean, that voice needs to be protected, however that pans out. As far as, the merger is concerned and, redundancies, I think that we should require specifics, and that promises of production and jobs are hollow without them. and I think they need to be held accountable to the promises that they make. I don't
Mr.
know
Costa.
technically.
Guardrails on this merger?
To me, if this merger goes through, the guardrails are gone. And perhaps we can't stop it at this point. I mean, it seems to me that the fix is in when it comes to Brendan Carr over at the FCC. They have made a very real and concerted effort to trying to create a Putin-style, Orban-style, government-dominated, I call it, state compromised media in this country, where the executives of these television networks are breathing down the necks of the news executives of those networks, who breathe down the necks of journalists at those networks to be careful about what you say and how you report the news. I was telling the senator before I came out here today, when I covered Barack Obama's second administration, and I never recall anybody, any executive, any editor ever telling me, hey, Jim, lay off of Barack Obama, lay off President Obama. But I will tell you, when Donald Trump was president of the United States, it was a different attitude. And there were concerns that, hey, are we going too far with this? Are we going too far with that? Didn't always happen. There were certain executives who certainly had my back and others who didn't. But we can't have a situation like that in this country where the government can have that kind of effect on journalists. Journalists should have the freedom to report the news as they see it, call balls and strikes. And this administration does not want that. They want those guardrails to be gone because they want to control what we consume in our news every day.
Representative Kamala
Thank
Gurdup.
you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for participating in this hearing, and for all the folks that are in the audience who I'm sure have a direct relationship to this industry and want to see it succeed. And thank you to the witnesses for sharing your stories. My question will be for Ms. DeLuca. We know that with these kinds of mergers, with this shrinkage that we're seeing in this industry, with the shrinkage that is so large, we know that it doesn't shrink evenly. And so certain voices will be left out. If you could just leave us with a little bit of hope, one or two things. Yeah, you have the hope. One or two things where we could be working together to support those independent and diverse voices in film and in the media, to support them as they are continuing to bust down doors, to share their story, to share their voices, because we know that those stories and those voices are reaching the hundreds of millions of folks that may not always see themselves represented in many of the stories that are being shown.
There's so many things I'd like to say there. So a moment of hope, though, is really hard, I think, right now when we have so many people that are really having a hard time making a living in this industry. And even if they are making these stories, they're not getting seen. There are so many talented independent filmmakers who are making the most brave, bold, innovative works that are just not able to make it through this marketplace. So I think anything that is helping balance out the marketplace will be useful. In some places, when mergers happen, they'll recapture some funding from there and put it into a fund that can go towards marketing for emerging content creators or for independent content. But I do actually want to take it back to the guardrails, because I think this is really key, if you don't mind. Okay. Guardrails and consent decrees are not a safeguard. We should not be relying on those, because we do know that things like the AT&T Time Warner consent decree, it was widely acknowledged as unenforceable in practice. Also, when these have been imposed on conditions in previous mergers, they've repeatedly failed to serve as meaningful guardrails. So not only are they difficult to enforce, but they're also resource intensive to monitor. And also, they're ineffective at preventing harm to competition, workers, and independent businesses. So rather than stopping the anti-competitive outcomes, it's really, they function too much as a mechanism that just allow the consolidation to proceed, which we really would not be in favor of. So I just wanted to leave with that, just so we know that we don't think that that is an option, especially because the harms that we've outlined in our testimony are really structural in nature, and they really won't be adequately addressed through behavioral commitments or post hoc enforcement mechanisms. So I just wanted to mention that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up, which is, if not this, then I want to hear from you what would work possibly. So let's talk later on. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you to all of our witnesses for your testimony today, and to my colleagues for their participation and their deep work and thought on this issue. These are great jobs. We want to keep them here at home. From my point of view, ideally here in California, but we certainly want to keep them in the United States of America. It's really not rocket science how we do that. We've largely drafted the federal tax credit legislation. It needs to be bipartisan, and we are working to gather bipartisan support for this. These are jobs in blue states and in red states. These are good American jobs. We are enormously proud of what this industry does and the degree to which it contributes to the cultural uplifting and output of America and our cultural influence around the world. We treasure and hold sacred our First Amendment and want to ensure that we have an independent media that speaks truth to power. I will say the challenge right now on that issue goes well beyond the media. It is a broad effort at censorship of every institution. We certainly see it in the media with media consolidation and, as you point out, Mr. Costa, potential domination. But we see it in attacks on the free speech and academic freedom at universities. We see it in efforts to tell law firms who they can represent and who they can't represent. We see it in efforts to tell companies who they can hire and who they cannot hire, who can sit on their board and who cannot sit on their board. We see it in efforts to intimidate the legislative branch. It is really across the whole of government. And nothing short of a concerted effort to push back on that is going to be successful in warding it off. Now, I have great optimism in this country. I think we're going to get through this difficult time. I think sometimes when you're in crisis, and we are in crisis as a country, it's hard to see how it ends, and sometimes it's even hard to see if it will end, but this too shall pass. But what we do right now makes a big difference. We need to deeply scrutinize this merger with all of its impact on jobs, on production, on theatrical release, on the whole theater economy, on the First Amendment. And this is part of that necessary oversight. All of you have added greatly to our understanding of the real human impacts of what we're discussing and debating. We'll take this back with us to Washington and see if we can put these ideas and thoughts into action. But thank you for helping inform the debate. Thank you for the great work you do every day. And with that, we are adjourned.